super glad y'all are here. We're about to have the most fun y'all have ever had talking about debut fiction in your life. So get hyped. And this is like half the room, so we get to have this like mixture of complete excitement also, but like chill coolness at the same time. Like I'm excited to see how that blends at the same time. Y'all have no idea the treat you're in. For like these people, I've gotten to meet 3 of them throughout the day and just met Ari like 4 minutes ago and I'm already obsessed. So y'all are brilliant. I love these books that you've written. I've written them all at least once, if not more. And I can't wait to talk to you about them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists and let you all go absolutely insane clapping for them in just a minute. Pause now. I'll tell you when. Okay. So first up, I'm going to talk about my friend right here, Alina Grabowski. She grew up in coastal Massachusetts and holds degrees from University of Pennsylvania and Vanderbilt University. Her debut novel, Women and Children First, was published by SJP Lit. That's Sarah Jessica Parker's Lit imprint for Zando. She knows her. Like, she knows her and has met her multiple times, like, within the past few months. She can call her right now. No. She was published by SJP Lit. In 2024, she lives in Austin, Texas with her awesome husband who, like, raises bees and does a lot of stuff, too. So, Alina Grabowski, everyone. One more down is Joseph Earl Thomas. I feel like I've always wanted to be your friend, and now I'm so excited. We'll try. Joseph Earl Thomas is the author of Sink, a memoir, long-listed for the Penn Gene Steinbook Award, the novel God Bless You, Otis Spunkmeyer, long-listed for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and forthcoming short story collection Leviathan Beach by Grand Central in 2025. His prose, poetry, and criticism has been published in the Paris Review, Kenyon Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, Dilettante Army, Late Light, and the Cleveland Review of Books. A graduate of the University of Notre Dame's MFA program, he also earned his PhD in English at the University of Pennsylvania. He teaches writing at Sarah Lawrence College and courses in Black Studies, Poetics, Video Games, and Queer Theory, and more at the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research. This man does it all as well. Look at him. Go for it. Ari, hey. I'm so glad we finally got to meet. I'm so excited. Shin was born in Ames, Iowa in 1986. She was raised in Manhattan for the first decade of her life, then Seoul for the second. She received a bachelor's degree in English from Princeton University and a doctorate in the same discipline from the University of Oxford. The author of Gertrude Stein's Surrealist Years, a study of Stein's later experimental gestures and their philosophical implications within Hitler's Europe. She is currently an assistant professor of English at the University of Southern Mississippi. Top anybody? Thank you. Give it up for Ari Shin.
What I'm talking about.
And last but not least, Melissa Mogollon on the end is just like one of my we met online talking about her book, and I was just like, hey, have we been friends our whole life? Maybe that's happened, and we feel that way. Melissa is a fiction writer and high school educator. Can I tell them more than that?
Sure.
She lives on campus outside of Providence, Rhode Island, at a boarding school with the kids she teaches. Like, she lives there on campus and teaches them at a boarding school. I just think that's the coolest thing. She has like dorm duty. What a cool teacher. I just love that. She holds an MFA in fiction from the Iowa Writers Workshop and a BA from George Washington University. Originally from Colombia and raised in Florida, she now lives in Rhode Island with her partner and her dog. Oye is her first novel. It was also longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, as well as Ari's book as well. So these are just like incredible books you're about to talk about, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. Without further ado, I would like to actually open up my Instagram. And I'm going to this is like the biggest round of applause you've ever given in your life, and it's going to be on Instagram for these 4 authors, and then we're going to talk. Are you ready? Give it up for Melissa Mogollon and the whole crowd. Publishing. It'll load. It'll take like an hour, so you can see it later. Okay. Y'all ready?
Yeah.
I'm excited. So my first question, just to kick us off, I'd love to go down the line, give you just 30 seconds or so, say who you are, again, just remind everybody, and then tell us either just give us your elevator pitch for your book, like what's your thing, or tell us what about your book is the most exciting thing about it for you. Alina, let's just go down the row.
Okay, I'm Alina. Thank you, John and Caleb, for moderating this panel and putting together these wonderful questions for us. The most exciting thing about my book, I'm not going to elevator pitch. That's like so hard. I feel like especially a first book feels like it's about everything to you, and that's like why you write it. But my book has 10 different first person characters in it. I love voice and I love characters. So up to you to decide whether that's exciting or not in the reading of it. But that was one of my favorite challenges of working on it.
It's seamless too. They all just work together and they snap together in this awesome puzzle. It's the coolest book. Joseph.
It's funny. So the answer to this question that I gave earlier was like that it's done. That's my favorite thing about it. But that's not necessarily true. I think in part I feel like the most exciting thing about it was that I got to play with voice in ways that I think are challenging me more and more, kind of every day. It's about the whole novel takes place over one day in an emergency department in Philadelphia, where it's a kind of contest between the interior life of the protagonist and the exterior life that is like being managed by people that he loves coming in and out of the hospital, and also a whole bunch of other kind of psychic issues.
And it's got this amazing stream of consciousness effect to it that may scare some people from like high school. We were like, what is this I'm reading in this textbook? But he pulls it off in the way that just makes it sink into you as you read it. I'm gonna say it's the coolest book for all four because they're all the coolest book. I love that book. Ari, would you like to tell us about Spring on the Peninsula?
So I'd say more than any kind of military or political commentary that you could read into it, I would actually just approach it as a love story at its core. It's someone, Kay, the main character, who's gone through a terrible breakup. Someone is just left. There's no real reason to speculate. And then it's his inability to move on as he's spiraling down outward. And Soul and his friends are also going through their own existential anxiety. So it's about love and heartbreak. And what do you do in the absence? And can you move on? You even want to move on?
That is a brilliant book. I read it, and what's amazing is as these characters kind of have these existential crises, the whole book kind of expands in what it's doing. So it starts off in this incredibly thoughtful, slow-paced way, and it turns into this funny, brilliant, twisty book that I just am so impressed that it became what it was by the end. It just blossoms as it goes through it. So an incredible read that I hope you'll all pick up. Melissa, let's talk about Oye. I love Oye so much.
Yeah, like Ari was so lovely when she spoke that. Like I'm trying to like not bounce off the walls. I'm like, anyways, I have a very loud voice, so I'm trying to bring it down. My favorite thing about my book, on a storytelling level, it is told through. It's a girl talking the whole time. She's calling her sister, and so it's many conversations over the course of a year. And so what you read is the protagonist's voice and what she's sharing with her sister. So it's very intimate. There's highs and lows. You know, sisters, they go for the jugular, so they kind of experience all the emotions. So I love the structure, but on a personal level, it's the grandmother in this book is loosely based off my grandmother, and I worked on this book for 6 years, and unexpectedly, my grandmother passed away while I was writing it. So it was like such a beautiful vehicle to spend more time with her as I got to write this. So that's probably my favorite thing about it.
It's such a cool book, hearing from one character essentially the entire time, just hearing their side, and still knowing about all of the other characters via how Luciana responds to them. Luciana is spicy. She is the character of the year to me. I just think Luciana is one of those people that you never forget after you read a book. I'm really excited. Also, she's funny. Like Melissa's funny. They're all funny.
She's 18.
Luciana is a teenager, and she is spicy and funny. Let's talk about funny in books a little bit. So I'll start with Melissa for this, and we can work our way back, or whoever's got an answer, go for it. So these 4 novels do it all, as you've just learned. We have a little bit of everything, but they all have these themes that run together that I thought was fascinating. They're smart, sad, playful, joyful, and exciting. They're 4 very different, exquisite styles of writing, but they're also all funny in completely different ways. There is this like loud, boisterous, laugh out loud humor, and there's also these really subtle, dry moments of humor that come through in all of them, but especially in more than others. I would love to ask you two questions, and y'all just take it away here. Melissa first. How do you get humor to stand out when you write it in a book? How does that how does that translate from your head in knowing it's funny to getting it on the page to making a reader laugh? And then if you have one, do you have a favorite joke?
I'll think of the joke. I think the humor in the book, I had to really think about my specific character, and not just what Melissa would find funny, but what she would realistically probably find funny as an 18-year-old girl trying to graduate high school and having to take care of her grandmother, which is kind of like the bulk of the action happening in the book. And a lot of the humor really was like the absurdities of a lot of the scenarios that they were having to enter. So the humor sometimes was like mechanical. It spoke for it. It wasn't a direct joke, really. Though she's funny because she's mean sometimes. She is 18, but her humor, watching her humor shift over the course of the novel was really lovely. And you watch her kind of take on her grandmother's humor in a way too. So you see the way that humor is used in this family to confront the toughest situations. And like the harder the situation is, the funnier these women get in the moment, which is just so they don't cry. And so that humor is there was so important for me. But I like beta tested these jokes for 6 years on everybody I knew. I would be like, is this funny? Do you think this is funny? To my students, my family, my partner. So these have been tried on many audiences, which is, I think, why they're successful. And I was really open to feedback. I constantly was having people give me notes on my jokes and tell me how I could be funnier. And so, yeah, I couldn't be precious about it. Yeah. A lot of times you realize only you think something is funny. Yeah.
That's every day of my life. So don't worry. Anybody else?
Oh, we're not going in order. Okay, my bad. I misunderstood. I don't know. I feel like I've had a weird relationship to humor because it's like the most contextual aesthetic form, I think, of all things. And a lot of things that apparently I'm told other people do not think are funny, I find hilarious. And in both books, and I think that in this one, a lot of the jokes are about specific musical traditions or eras, everything from like jokes about the entire like state property era of rap music in Philadelphia specifically to like Michelle Branch or something like that. And I think that range is really funny to me specifically. And a lot of the characters find it funny. But I think one of the things that was fun to play with were when people directly do not, and they're like, that's not funny, shut the hell up, to another character, and like how people deal with the fallout of that.
Okay, go for it.
I was going to say, in the book, there's a chapter with quotations, and then the quotations are scrambled in a way that I'm just silly, stupid. There's the humor in that. My personal brand of humor, though, I like dancing, little noises, and little animal expressions. So it's not terribly verbal. So the humor I find in real life versus on the page is very, very distinct.
I think this book, the sort of central event that all of these 10 women are circulating around is the death of a local high school student. So it's a lot about grief and memory, and it's fairly dark. And I think humor is often a vehicle for dealing with traumatic or scary or depressing things that have happened to you. And I think humor also allows a lot of sort of like shocking honesty. Like you'll package something that maybe wouldn't normally be said in a certain scenario, but if you make it into a joke, it's somehow more palatable. So I think a lot of the women in the novel are struggling with their situations and using humor to make light of it and figure out how to just like cope and go on with their lives too, despite what's happened.
Yeah. And that's what I start off with all this fun, but you realize too, reading these books, that they all really delve down into these deep, dark places. Every one of them has a a dark spot that I think is what it's really exploring the most that I think is important. Personally, I work in the medical field, and I love a book where I recognize and see something I know about in the book too. It just pops out to you just because you've been there. And then it's kind of cool because there's a little bit of a medical theme that runs through all of these books, some more than others, but there's definitely that real life right in front of you experience with healthcare and medicine that comes through, at least in some part of the book. Some very much that's where it's based. Also, there are a few people in here that I work with. We have a M3, M4, or third year, fourth year medical student book club that I lead at the hospital, and a few of them are here today. So this is our book club for them as well. So they're here, and I think that I would love to have them able to hear some of this to you, to talk about later. Hospital, surgery, trauma bay, all these places come up in a lot of these books. There's a random shingles event that happens out of nowhere. Someone gets stressed out to the point they get shingles. There's a seizure. There's psychiatric diagnoses, medical emergencies, all pop up in these books. These novels cover all those bases. I always remind my students that patients we meet are possibly having one of the worst days of their life. And that really comes through in a book. What is it about disease and medicine that bears humans so vulnerable and translates onto the page so well?
I'm still stuck on you can get shingles from being stressed out.
Oh, yeah.
That happened to my editor.
Oh, okay.
I'm
A
like,
lot more common than you think. Okay. Can you repeat the last part of your question, please?
yeah, so what is it about disease and medicine that really bears that humanness, so that raw humanity forward to where it translates onto the page and brings a human to life on a page? I want to say that. How do you bring a character to life in the context of medicine and disease?
I think for me, in this book, the medical event highlights a lot of like the power structures that this family is dealing with. The granddaughter is having to translate a lot of the things that the doctors are saying to her grandmother. So we see kind of that responsibility that the protagonist bears in that sense. A literal language barrier, but then also we get to see their psyches more. Like we see the way what their deepest health beliefs of how around their agency and what they get to decide for their body. And you add the tension of a medical emergency or a traumatic event, whether, short-term or long-term. And you see kind of people either dig their heels in the ground and become more themselves in case of emergency, or you see people pivot and shift. So that was really important to me for my characters. Like one faced with this life-altering moment, were they going to dig their heels in the ground and become more stubborn in who they are and believe in who they are stronger, or were they going to potentially bring in this new information and have a change of perspective? So that I was excited about that with the medicine. Yeah.
My novel isn't about actual disease so much as psychosomatics and mostly work stress, and also, of course, the stress of heartbreak. But your body doesn't lie, and you're feeling turmoil or anguish on the rise, whether it's bloody nose, migraine, eczema, fever, sweating. Your body just falls apart. Your spirit is also falling apart, and that's where I track for your body. Flesh is a kind of cartography, a map of your own pain.
Yeah, I mean, I think having it, one of the reasons why I wanted to have the whole novel set in hospitals, in part because it's like it's one of the few places where you force people of different social positions into the same room, and you have to have them do something, in part to care for each other in one way or another. And I think that there's a lot of kind of messiness that comes out in that you don't see in other spaces that I think we're accustomed to, particularly like a literary festival, for example, right? So to have all those different people of different class positions kind of like thrust together, it forces one, you have to admit that you do all have this particular set of ailments. It reminded me of writing the first book. I was like, I want to write a book that's only about childhood because I want to force a discussion about what it means to ignore the shared thing. And oftentimes that is the body, potential illness, and all these different kind of ways that we kind of overlook. I also think in and around illness that it's constant and never really, whether you're in or out of the hospital, I think there's always some degree of ailment that one is dealing with that you might not have the the medical insurance, the time, the wherewithal or what have you to deal with or something. And within those spaces, you always have something else happening. So the hospital itself is a setting where like the kids are playing Pokemon Go in the morgue, some of whom are sick or some of whom are not. And how do you enact or try to care for people or someone when you have depleted or limited resources and you are yourself also ill is a big question that I'm interested in.
We had a resident get in trouble for playing Pokemon Go on a shift. I remember.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah,
that
too.
tracks. I believe that.
I don't know if it was by the morgue, but like way off from the ER.
The character Lucy who dies in the book, you learn throughout reading that she had epilepsy and I had epilepsy when I was younger, and it like totally defined my relationship to my body. It was something I thought I had complete control of, and then quite literally, that control is seized. And there was also always the fear of like a seizure happening publicly and like that control being wrested from you like in a public manner. And so that totally just made me feel like, oh, anything can happen at any time. I feel very insecure in my body. Obviously, as a young woman, you have tons of other insecurities you're also dealing with. And sort of what Joseph was saying as well, I would go to the Children's Neurology Hospital in Boston, which was where I grew up, and it's like the children's hospital is huge, it's very fancy, and it's like kid coded in this bizarre way. It's like you don't go to like the neurology ward, you go to like the fish ward, and there's like all of these weird symbols for the hospital. And then you get there and there's like, you're in the neurology ward, babies wearing caps, crying, they don't want to be there, but it's like brightly colored, and also look at all these crayons you have, and it's just so utterly like bizarre. And even as a kid, I remember being like, this is really weird. So I think that like the body, particularly like the female body, is a big theme in this, and I think like medicine and ailment, disease, like a way to explore that even further.
I remember messaging you after reading this part of the book where somebody is trying to find their friend at the hospital, and you just have that experience of like, you walk in and everything looked like it was slapped together by, I can't remember the quote you said, but it looked like it was just, the whole hospital was slapped together by somebody who was on drugs, who had never made a plan in their life. And I was like, man, I know that, I worked there. And I just so appreciated that feeling that I know everybody who's had to go in a hospital has, of walking in and going like, but you want me to go through this part to get to the cafeteria that is where my doctor is? Like, it just makes no sense.
It's so inaccessible, which I also feel like adds
stairs?
to this idea of feeling like out of control, your body's not working, and also literally the building makes no sense.
There's a little bit of that in yours too. I had so much fun reading Melissa's, because the way that especially the grandmother was in the room dealing with nurses that were coming in. She's making best friends ever and everything, but then tell us a little bit about the experience she had in the hospital.
Yeah, so the main character, the 18-year-old we keep referencing, her name is Luciana, and she's in the hospital with her grandmother, who they don't know why she turned yellow, but she has turned yellow. And so they're trying to figure out what is wrong with her. The grandmother character is absurd in the best way in this book. She's very vain. She does not want to be a grandmother, but she has to be. So she's like, well, okay. Her main concern in life is being beautiful, which her granddaughter respects and finds hilarious. But they're very close. They almost function as sisters in a way in this book. And so she's reporting to her real sister, like, Grandma does not want to take her crop top off for the surgery. Grandma keeps visiting hospital rooms to see if anyone has nicer hair than her. Grandma keeps trying to tip the nurses. Like, I don't know what's going on. And so a lot of the, you get the closeness they have through these moments in this hospital room where they're sharing, where they're both trying to literally survive in different ways. But the granddaughter is in and out of the hospital visiting her grandma, so she makes friends with like security, the nurses. She goes out, comes back from the bar to the hotel, not the hotel, the hospital, and it's very confusing. There's a lot of scenes I took out where she was just lost. So I was like, this would be her reality. She would be like, what the heck is this wing and this wing? And so, yeah, it becomes a second home for her in a way.
Half your job working at a hospital, you end up just being a tour guide for the hospital, and you just say like, okay, let's just walk there. I can't even tell you. While all of the characters in these books are dealing with some emergency or some grief or some, you know, outward expression of what they're dealing with on the inside, everybody also is sort of in love with somebody or several people, or just keep trying to keep it a secret. That was the third thing that I really noticed was fun running through these, was everybody had, you know, a love interest that they were struggling with. It's like they're torn between, I just want to be a normal person that gets to go have fun with the people I like versus dealing with the stuff that life has. Y'all's books are incredible at exploring the depths of love. And like you said, yours, Ari, you said yours is a love story at the heart of it. So we can talk a little bit about the love in your books, but I would love to know, just on a personal level, have you ever been on a really bad date? Or if you haven't, which, bless you, have you been on a great date? Either or.
Oh, both. And then as an example, of a bad day, people forget their wallet, people being, a little bit abrasive, and the talk gets too political, unexpected. Not it's wrong to talk about politics, but sometimes it's just not framed in the right way. So these kinds of things, and all of a sudden, the cocktail hour or dinner becomes very awkward indeed. So absolutely.
I want to hear more about your book being a love story. If that's okay.
Okay. One way of reading the way that I started off with, that Kay is still in love with his ex, the person, the person, and he fails to move on, and he doesn't want to move on. Now, depending on how you read it, maybe for somebody else, and some of my friends thought this, they said, well, actually, I don't think somebody like Kay can love anybody. And I think that's actually the point to his personality, or maybe it's saying something about the human condition. We don't really know the people around us, even though we think we do. We don't even really know ourselves. We're fundamentally selfish, short-sighted, and you can go in that centropic direction. But I think that's wrong. I choose in the form that was the love of his life, and he's failing to rise to the phoenix from the ashes.
Anybody been on a bad date?
I don't have a bad date story.
My very corny answer is like every day until I met my fiance, because that's really but I dated women for most of my life, and so women tend to plan really great dates. So, everyone's been really nice. Yeah.
My husband is a big gardener, and on our first date, he brought me a bag of kale. And what I didn't know at the time was his one patty pan squash, like prized crop. This is like a small squash. It just looks like a small pumpkin. And we continue today, a la why he's my husband. And he came over and found the patty pan squash in our like crisp, like at the bottom of the crisper, like weeks later. He was like, "You never ate it?" And I was like, "It's another patty pan squash that I happen to have." But yeah, many plants involved.
Why did he bring kale? What is this?
From I don't know. Matthew also used to suggest he would eat massive amounts of kale. This man, not to go too off track, but like literally gave himself a hormone imbalance eating too much kale. So clearly he was like, I can't be eating all of this. Here you go.
I guess I don't know if this one is bad, but so I once went on a date with someone who I didn't know at the time, turned out to be my friend's mom's friend. And then we were all at a cookout like a couple weeks later, and she showed up and was acting really brand new, as if like she didn't know or something like that. And so it was like a semi falling out between my friend's mom and me, and then she forgot about it like a week later, and everything was kind of fun. Yeah, but I think that's the most, like, one of the weirdest, I guess.
That's weird. I haven't written a book, but my bad date was, and it didn't even happen. This was a bad date that never happened. I was 14 in 9th grade, and I was going on a date to Applebee's with a 10th grader from a different school. Like, it was a bit, and what? I'm not in 9th grade. Yeah. 14, 15. Like, that's a big difference at that point. Anyway, she texted me. This is like early texting, like my Nokia brick, and I got a text. Like, you can only be so much, but it was long, and it said, "If you don't kiss me at Applebee's, I'm gonna pin you down to the table and do it myself." We did not go on the date, and I don't think I ever saw her again either. So that's my horrible date story. I just was like scared to death. I'm like, I'm a kid, leave me alone. Yeah. So anytime there's love in a story, I feel it. I'm like, I can relate to these people struggling here. My wife is awesome. It's not her. So a lot of folks come. I'm gonna switch gears, and then after this, I'd love to let y'all have a chance to ask questions. I think that y'all have 4 of the coolest people I've met in a long time up here who have just published their first novel. That's huge, and I know a lot of people come to these because you've had an idea about writing a novel before, maybe, or maybe you've written one and you have been through this, their shoes. What advice? I'll start with Alina, and we'll go that way. What advice would you give to somebody here who has started writing a novel and would love to be on this panel one day?
Oh my gosh. I feel like the standard advice is just like you need to be tenacious and keep going. My book when you go on submission, that's when your agent tries and sells your book to editors. This did not sell in the first round of submission. And I'd been working on it for like close to 6 or 7 years then. So then I revised it some more. We took it out for submission again. It sold, but
Sarah Jessica Parker.
I think just protecting your relationship with writing is so important, because I think what's so fun, at least for me, is that time when like the story is just yours. You're so deep in your interior world and reflection and creating this narrative that's like so rich and has come wholly like from your own mind. And I think as long as you keep in mind why the story is important to you, that will guide you, because ultimately something becomes a novel because the market has dictated that readers will read it, and your agent's job is to get as much money for it, and that's very separate from writing, I think, in most ways. So I think just holding on to your relationship with writing and having community. I say this also as someone who like has an MFA and went to conferences, and so I sort of you have connections and a leg up if you do those things as well. So I think if you don't perhaps have access to those sorts of institutions, like I've kind of been amazed by some of like the Facebook groups and like online communities also that are disseminating this sort of information. I think that's a great resource as well.
I mean, I feel like it's fair to say that giving up is an option. I'm dead serious, and just not doing it, and just putting it away for a long time. I think sometimes we forget that, I'm glad you brought the market. Sometimes, whether or not the novel is finished or gets published has nothing to do with whether it's good or not.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my favorite writers, whose books I think are incredible and like the world will not exist insofar as I know it without them, got incredibly disrespected for a long time before anybody published anything they wrote, and then even now don't always get the kind of respect that I would suggest that they deserve. So that's always important to remember. And it's also true that the first book that comes out isn't always the first thing that you write, and that the thousands and thousands of pages that I wrote either for practice or that I thought were good for thinking might not ever go anywhere, and that's okay too, and that you should take that just as seriously. But dead serious, it might be okay to just put it down, give up, not do it at that moment, do something else. And if you can't do anything else but to write the book, then I think is the time to go back to doing it.
I guess something else I would add on top of what's been said would be to not look so much for encouragement from other people. Very few people are going to say, yes, do it, and put energy into that. Everybody has their own problems, their own jobs, their own projects they're working on. If you want to do something and you don't want to wait anymore, you've already taken the break and you're coming back, just fucking do it. Just do it. And then you'll figure it out.
Yeah, similar. I think if we're talking about like a project, a book, or finishing the book, to me that feels different than writing, like your relationship to writing. But if we're talking about finishing a book, I would say you're gonna need to be very disciplined. You're gonna have 100 reasons to not write in a day, whether you have another job or family obligations. to just try to get as disciplined as you can if you are trying to work towards an end. I read this quote last week that was like, writing is really just a test of character. And I felt that. I was like, yeah, because I felt psychotic what I was doing, like looking at the same pages over and over again. And it was like, no one understood it around me. My partner was like, you've already edited this page like for a month. I'm like, it doesn't matter. And so it's just kind of how, yeah, you have to be willing to push yourself, honestly, to almost the brink of insanity with to finish, because it's not going to feel probably a natural process to sit down for so long and look at the same words and think, is there a better way for me to say this? But it's supposed to be fun, so it was fun. Like, we do it because that's enjoyable to play with words. So yeah.
That's what any job you do. I tell my students at work when we're rounding and seeing patients, I'm like, I know this is hard. I know this is hard, and you worked a long time to do this, and maybe it's not fun today. If you're not having fun, tell me, and we need to find a way to make this fun. I think fun goes a long way in making the not fun parts fun. That's stupid. Okay.
Follow the fun.
Yeah, it should be fun. This is why you do this. We've got about 20 minutes left. I'd love to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions of these authors.
Did you read it? Okay. Oh, thank you. I wrote this book because I wanted a sister. I have 2 brothers, and I'm the oldest of 3. And I always wanted an older woman in my life to really tell me what to do at all times, because I felt like I was the one giving orders constantly as the oldest sister. And so I created the older sister, Mari. But really, who came out of left field was the youngest sister, Luciana, who I never thought existed, and I never expected her because I did not want another younger sibling. But then she just came out, and I was just like falling in love with her as I was writing. And I think they are both me. They're both different parts of me. I probably resemble more the older sister a little bit more than Luciana, but Luciana's who I wish I would have been, I think, when I was younger. Thank you for asking. Lovely question.
Yes, I think to some degree everyone does it. They just usually lie about it, or or distinctions in ethnography and like the history of anthropology teach us to lie about it. I.e., if some type of subjects are allowed to write all about themselves and call it fiction and not have it related to their own lives, then others simply are not, and that has to do with at least the last 400 years in the kind of American context. But I think for me, I'm incredibly comfortable with it. I think it's necessary because the kinds of, in particular, really messy, difficult kinds of characters I'm interested in, who are usually outside the sphere of concern, even in the work that we tend to call radical. In order to write those kinds of people, honestly, I have to, make some kind of critique of myself alongside that, and I can't put myself above other people. And one of the things that I really don't like is that degree of moralizing, and I think one of the ways to get around that and to really write through difficulty is to put yourself right alongside the people who you are kind of want to engage with and think about.
I mean, I mentioned that I had epilepsy when I was younger, and I incorporated that into the book. I think a lot of it for me is that I'm very interested in writing about how things feel like in the body physically. I feel like a lot of that's missing from fiction a lot of the time, and I like to read about how things like literally feel. And so if I haven't experienced something, that's really hard, which is obviously not to say you can't write about things you don't know well, but I think oftentimes when you have a niche understanding of something, you're just able to tackle it with a depth that you wouldn't be able to without firsthand experience. So I feel like I pull from a lot of different aspects of my life, not like in terms of exact characters, but experiences or places I've been, that kind of thing.
That was a great question. Is everybody able to hear when somebody asks without a microphone? You just ask. Okay, good. Just confirming. I was going to repeat it if you had.
I guess the game that I play in my head, I grow more comfortable, but of course it's uncomfortable in the way that I'm playing 2 truths and a lie, or 2 lies and a truth. I'm minding my own life. I use people around me, and I basically try to hide my tracks here and there, and I make up a lot. So then me being successful in my mind is when people can't really tell. It feels authentic, and it's resonating, but they can't really tell if it's me, and I'm not somebody who wants to do autobiographical work or capitalize on the personal element of it. And that's also why my book is written resolutely in the third person. I want that emotional distance, that coldness, and that sense of contraction. So I'm trying to stay neutral to answer your question.
Thank you for that question. That was great.
The first, it was a huge plus because also I read and I wrote a little bit about Stein, that you can do whatever you want. You can push it as far as you want in terms of the formal parameters. She made me brave, even though she didn't make any money and she was hugely disrespected then and now, that I don't even have to write grammatically. I don't have to have this neat through line or narrative arcs. I can do whatever I want. Now, then, that being said, then I went my own way, but my background training was very, very helpful indeed.
Yeah, I love that example of basically being like, all these other people did this work. I have studied those folks. Can we finally, instead of simply repeating that we know other people have did this work, start with respecting them and pushing that work forward from that point on? And I think that that's, for me, super important in all different kinds of writing when it comes to scholarship, criticism, and literature as well, not just in the American context, but all over. I think some of the things that were in my head were thinking about the way that Fernanda Melchor writes in both Spanish and English, and also thinking about a lot of the theory and scholarship stuff that I was reading that makes its way into the book as kind of forms of narrative problems as well, too.
I guess I'll touch maybe on like environment, because I feel like that's a big thing too that I've inherited. I'm from New England, and I feel like a big sort of, I don't know, remnant of that like Protestant culture is like not talking about things directly. Like everyone is so repressed. I live in Texas now, and my like sort of friends from childhood growing up are like shocked. They're like, "How can you live in Texas?" And like, so what is Massachusetts? This like amazing like bastion of free expression and whatnot. I mean, obviously it's more complicated than that, but I think a lot of what I'm interested in my work, because of sort of growing up in that environment, is like people who don't feel like they can express themselves fully, or what they're really trying to say is just under the surface, and what it looks like when we don't feel like we can be open and direct with one another and are like scared of conflict, which I think a lot of the women are dealing with. So I feel like that very much comes from just the vibes of Massachusetts and growing up in that area.
Similar to that, growing kind of the opposite as I grew up in South Florida. So I think in the predominantly Latino neighborhood and a Latino household, and I think I've just seen so many young girls be told to shut up, not literally, but like just silenced, that I really wanted to clear the runway and just have a young teenage girl talk the whole time, just to see what the heck she would say, because a lot of times, yeah, their voices don't really get. So I was just excited to hear a young girl talk. I do teach high schoolers, so I do hear them quite often. But
Thank you for that question. That was awesome. Hey. So she asked, "Is there a moment where you knew you had this in the bag?" Basically, I tell my students a lot, like whenever you have a moment at work or at school when you know you're doing what you meant to be doing the whole time, put a pin in it. Make sure you remember those moments because it's really important later to be able to reflect on those when it's hard. So I think you're asking for like, what was that moment for you? Where like, I am crushing this. I'm a writer and I'm doing the thing.
Like for success or for fun? Like for feeling anything? Okay.
It could be both.
Yeah.
So my dream was always to be a writer and a critic, even though I started off as a critic first. So for me, more than any kind of external validation that happened, although of course we all want that, we're all very sensitive to that, is when I had an entire winter break and I didn't do anything related to my daytime job once because I was so sick and tired of it by then. And then I just reserved that entire time to start the novel. And then when I was in the middle of that whole 2 months, and I thought, wow, I'm really committing. And nobody, again, encouraged me. Nobody said, do this. Everyone was worried around me. Can you maintain your daytime job? Are you going to lose your livelihood because you're not producing other things or you're not preparing for other things? And then I thought, okay. And that sense of fear was exhilarating.
I think it's a weird thing. I worked in medicine and a bunch of other jobs first prior to deciding that I was going to become a writer. I did not think of that as a real trajectory or possibility. But this is my second book. The first book is a memoir that's in third and second person, in part dealing with some of the problems that you had brought up, Ari. And I felt after, I didn't really know until after that was finished. And I was able to maintain a certain kind of conviction about my own set of style or formal questions that I was answering that actually had nothing to do with anything that anyone else was saying. And even though I was able to synthesize a lot of that other work and still be able to reject it and say, no, that's actually not what I want. Like that's when I developed the confidence to say I will write whatever I want, whenever I want, in perpetuity.
Honestly, I think it's a really precarious career and pursuit. Like, I don't know if I've ever felt like I'm crushing it. I wish I had experienced that. But it's hard because so many people have to say yes to you and open doors for you if you do want a book to, appear in published form. Of course, you can write novels on your own. And I think that particular space of just like being alone, writing by hand, just being like, oh, I could do this for hours. It doesn't matter if anyone sees it. This is something that feels really meaningful and interesting. When there's sort of a question that I didn't realize I had, that I'm like, oh, wait, I want to figure out what this is. I think that's what keeps me motivated and going. But I mean, other than that, I'm like, will I write another book? I hope so, but who knows?
Yeah, I think when I realized maybe like I didn't have to do it, like I sold my book and I was able to be a writer full time. I did that for 2 years and I really missed teaching. And I realized I love teaching as much as I love writing. I love youth. I love empowering youth. And I'm such a people person and writing is very solitary. So I thought like I don't have to choose between writing and teaching because I don't have to publish. So time is not an issue. I can take 10 years. I could write only on weekends I'm not in no rush. And when I returned to teaching, it was amazing and it affirmed to me that I want to do both. And no one is forcing me to write. And I'm not trying to live off my writing anymore. Mm-hmm. And so that freed me in a really beautiful way where I'm so excited now to work on many novels for the rest of my life. And if they get published, that'd be awesome. But I'm doing it for me. Before I thought it was my dream. And then I got it. And then I thought, no, this thing I've been doing in the background the whole time, I actually really love it. I love children. I love education. And so really lucky I get to do both.
That's a good question. Hey.
I want to do another book just to prove to myself that it wasn't a fever dream. It wasn't like this thing that just came together. But there is pressure. There's immense pressure everywhere. I don't know if I always get asked, like, what are you working on next? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? I'm not feeling it specifically from my agent or editor, which is lovely. But there definitely is that back of your mind, like the clock. Like you're like, am I going to produce again?
I mean, I guess. I think it still feels like I have to, because there's nothing else that's this difficult that will give me this much pleasure and allow me to know what I really think. And if I found something else that was able to satisfy that need, then I would be okay with like transferring that like kind of really important spiritual part of myself elsewhere, but I just haven't. And it's writing.
I feel like a bit similar to what Just was saying is I don't know of anything else where I feel like I can fully challenge myself to the extent that I can with writing, where I can look at the page and be like, I know this isn't good enough. I know that this is not there. Like for everything else, like for the gym, need to go to a class, or like, I need to be project managed on certain things. But for writing, it feels like every day is difficult in this like incredibly satisfying way where you're always pushing yourself to the edge of what you're capable of. And I just don't have anything else where just solo me, I feel like I can do that. And like the best feeling I think is the end of a long like day of writing where you've just like totally exhausted yourself, like creatively, intellectually, emotionally. And I also don't know any other like pursuit that would touch all of those sort of different angles of being human too.
Really, I was like, when you were talking, I was thinking like, damn, have you ever written a sentence and then got up and be like, that was fire, like that shit, like I feel good about that. I'm gonna walk away for the rest of the day, like, come on kids, let's go to the dog park. I'm done working today, like that kind of shit,
And then the next day you're like, what the?
Yeah. Or you can't do it again. And you're like, damn.
Yeah.
The honest answer to that question is there's no end to my ambition. That's not necessarily a good thing, actually. It brings a lot of unhappiness with it. So now that I just started, and now that I've gotten a taste of what I've been wanting for so long, now I want it all. I want something out every 3 to 5 years, and not a page, not an airport book, not a page burner, but something that for me is the highest of the high art. And then also at the same time, balancing out this ambition that keeps pushing is to not allow myself to get corrupted by it. How much is this because I want to impress people, because I want to be seen special, I want all this validation, whatever it be. And at the same time, and as my characters keep on questioning themselves too, it's all just for pleasure. For us, at the end of the day, it's just one life and it's not serious. So pushing the book forward, knowing at the end of the day, I mean, it is also a lesson of futility. So at the end of the day, let's just try to be happy and go about our goals and dreams in a good mindset instead of the dark horse. But yes, I do feel that pull quite a bit.
I love that answer. We got time we give him one or two more. Go for it.
I think it would depend how people take the last chapter after there's a time lapse, whether they take it in an optimistic way or in a dystopian way. But I will say that yes, Seoul, South Korea, and also the situation with North Korea had a huge impact just in terms of how competitive it is. There's 1,000 people in one room that can do something so well. So it's a very tough environment, mentally, psychologically. So that absolutely also has impacted my characters, and again, my own the way I talk about being a writer, what that takes.
Mine's a quick answer. It takes place in Florida. That's it. No. But she's like, our character here is like constantly at war with Florida. South Florida particularly. What? And literal alligators. Yeah. So the environment is definitely like an antagonist in a way, and the politics of the area for her as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think by way of, not to be all like Foucault or whatever, but like, I think that your interiority, like who you are as a person, how you become a subject, has everything to do with what's on at the outside, the kind of historical traces that are left upon you, and whether or not you can escape that in any way, shape or form is not, purely human consciousness, but it's made up of the material structure of the world, just period. And that has a lot to do with something like climate change, with the fact that, if you are in a trauma center, that the hotter it is, the more often people are going to be coming in with gunshot wounds. Just on a factual kind of statistical basis, it's something that you understand. And it has to do with the fact of how are you actually able to see or do anything outside of your own subject formation at all? And what does that struggle really look like? And I think that every character in the book is in some way dealing with that problem without realizing that they're dealing with that problem. It's only when you're confronted with someone else who might be a little bit further outside of your own formation that you understand what's happening.
This book is set in a small coastal town, very much based on where I grew up in Massachusetts, and I feel like so many different aspects of the town were appealing to me, being on the water and just like literally houses falling into the water because the beaches are eroding, and also like the class element of that, because the houses by the water have the highest real estate value and are typically part-time occupied by vacationers, and so the town's very stratified in that sense. And I mentioned the Protestants before, but Massachusetts is also very Catholic. I think 40% Catholic, and the town where I grew up was heavily, heavily Catholic, and so like religion and climate and class felt so just really like ripe to explore in this particular town, as I'm sure like everyone's hometown is for them. Like it's the forces that have shaped you, and so I think place is really important to my work, and I think always will be for sure.
Thank you guys so much for asking these questions. These have been brilliant questions. Thank you. Y'all do this next. We are out of time. I just wanted to say to you guys, thank you so much for debut moderator, I guess, over here. It has been really one of the true joys of my, for sure my year, but if not my life, to get to know you guys in this way, get to read your books and really think about them on a level that, I don't know, I feel like I got to know you as a person and an artist through this whole thing, and it's been so much fun for me. I'm not trying to make it about me, but man, I had a good time. So I have a lot of respect for the four of you, and I'm really, really appreciative of what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.